are things? Business good?
Why wouldn't it be, seeing as I make the best arms in the Isles? Just look. Iron ore from the bowels of Mount Ardfand, where giants once tore up the earth. Then my forge fire, blazing unbroken for 6 generations, its care passed from father to son. And every day come dawn, Hara, my youngest, she pricks her finger and squeezes a drop of her blood into the water I use to temper the blades.
Anything new in Fierstall?
No, nothing. This ain't the continent. Fashions don't change with the melting snows. We live like our fathers and grandfathers lived, fishing, hunting and raiding. And so shall we live, to Ragnarok and beyond.
Yearning to play a few rounds of Gwent. That ought to set me straight.
Oh my goodness.
Graham was able to bank his helicopter away from the blast. The pilots are panicking, but then the UFO just zips
What
away.
was this guy planning to do?
The officers wake up their boss, Lieutenant David Pope, to give him their full report.
Pope can't believe what he's hearing. He knows that his officers are credible. He stated in a report that Graham was a veteran pilot and that both he and Downs were military veterans with many years of service.
So look at the facts here. These are police officers who work in the air. They work in the sky every single day. Well, of course they know the difference between a star, a planet, and some bell-shaped thing flying around their helicopter.
Lieutenant Pope submits his report to superiors, but it goes unnoticed.
Downs and Graham can't believe the report isn't being taken seriously. And then, if that isn't enough, fellow colleagues warn them to just let it go because it was starting to make the department look bad. It makes you wonder if these police officers were hung out to dry with nowhere for them to go and no one to provide any answers.
Is the military now intentionally ignoring UFO reports by police officers in order to protect law enforcement authority or to protect themselves by avoiding a paper trail?
It's almost a relief when I hear that there's some official involved, someone who is trained to observe, because the credibility of these things is so often challenged. One thing that I want to see in my lifetime is some answer for these experiences that I've had. I want to see some kind of government recognition. If they would just, come out and say, yes, it is real. This is actually happening.
With the majority of UFO sightings at night, it makes sense that the officers working these late shifts would be the most likely witnesses of such phenomena.
At least we won.
When government policy states
Well,
that
let's see what he
UFOs
has.
do not exist, what happens when their local law enforcement agents
let me have a
see
look.
and report UFO sightings? Over the years, it appears policy has changed from deflection to discreditation to disregarding entirely, leaving police officers with nowhere to turn when it comes to reporting these incidents. January 5th, 2000, near Scott Air Force Base, Illinois.
Melvin Knoll, a local Highland, Illinois truck driver, pulls into his company office at 4 a.m. He looks up and notices this really bright light in the sky that's moving towards him. And he realizes that the light is actually coming from a huge triangle-looking craft.
A recording from the county radio dispatcher documents the driver's report to the Highland Police Department.
We received a call from the Highland PD in reference to a truck driver who just stopped in and said there was a flying object.
Officer Ed Barton responds to the call at 4:10 a.m. He asks the county dispatcher if she's joking.
Like you to craft
Dispatcher says
something.
no.
What?
The man who
Relax,
stopped
far.
in is totally serious.
Just a quick question. If I happen to find it, what am I supposed to
So
do?
long.
Smooth
As soon
sailing.
as Officer Barton turns into Route 4,
Halfway there.
there's a bright light coming from a large triangle. He pulls over to the side of the road, kills the car lights, and turns off his radio to see if this thing is making any noise.
The object makes no sound, but he can see every detail on this craft because it's moving right above him at a steady speed. As soon as he passes, he radios the sighting into Central Command. He predicts that the object should be heading to the town of Shiloh, Illinois any moment.
In Shiloh, Officer David Barton soon radios in that he sees the craft as well.
What does it look like to you?
It's kind of V-shaped.
Several minutes later, at 4:29 a.m., Officer Craig Stevens radios in that he also sees a triangular UFO passing over his patrol car. And then, at 4:35 a.m., shining out fast into the tractor lights.
But death.
Contact Air Force Base and see if they have anything flying in this area.
Dispatch calls Scott Air Force Base and reports that they have not detected any unidentified object on their radar.
Ooh.
But they have officers
Whoa.
using the same craft. And Scott Air Force Base claims they've got nothing. It just doesn't add up.
This was a huge case. You have 4 police witnesses, media interest, and yet the military claims that they have no knowledge about anything that's in the vicinity. But I find it impossible to believe Scott Air Force Base is not going to be able to detect a
Harpies got their nest here.
triangular craft in its vicinity. And yet this is exactly what they claim.
Does the
There,
government
dear.
now turn a blind eye when it comes to these kinds of sightings?
The government knows what's going on. They don't talk about it. They won't report it. Any singular event that has happened with pilots reporting, the police department on the ground reporting this, and then the story dies the next day. You don't know if there's an investigation going on internally. We know that there is, but the government doesn't talk about it. Any government.
You can imagine the courage it takes to come forward with these strange stories. These men who have been trained, they're out there under the sky every day. We trust these men.
As a son of a cop and having grown up around cops my whole life, and knowing the kinds of witnesses that they are, I find it offensive when you start seeing all the ridicule that so many of them have been facing. Once a police officer has seen a UFO, they very adamantly will defend what they saw against all odds.
Many of these police cases go unreported because of a fear of ridicule, but some brave officers do come to us to report their stories. They recognize that these are important cases that shouldn't be swept under the rug, and they'd also like some answers to what they've witnessed. We have now become the place for police officers to come to report UFO encounters.
When you have this kind of experience, seeing a UFO or something that's unexplainable, and you try to report it, they'll tell you we don't investigate this kind of phenomenon. If you want answers, you have to go to someone outside of the system, which chances are it's not going to be
Police encounters with UFOs are some of the most detailed witness reports on record.
Bubba.
And yet, they are continually disregarded by higher
Hi.
authorities.
How are you?
Distancing themselves from these UFO
Feeling better?
MUFON remains a source that our law enforcement, both civilian and military, can turn to and be taken seriously. As these officers continue to spend so much time on the front lines of our streets and military bases, the unusual sightings they document will be revealed in the files of Hangar 1.
What do you want, man?
Ann Bean, known to everyone as Beanie, arrives at what she believes is a plane crash.
How about a round of Gwent?
Beanie and the ambulance driver pull up
Let's
to the
play.
side of the
I
road.
thought I played this guy already.
Police officers are waiting for them. Beanie thinks she's responding to a plane crash.
One of the officers informs her that the crash site is not far off the road. They found 3 bodies badly injured. There's something unusual about them.
Not sure what to expect, Nurse Bean follows the police officer into the field.
At the scene, Beanie sees the wreckage strewn about the field. Lying nearby are 3 small bodies badly burned. Thinking she's looking at children, Beanie immediately asks, "Where are the parents?"
bodies to check for vital signs. As she's examining the bodies, she realizes that these are not children as she initially assumed. They're small and similar to human bodies, but there's something different about them.
According to Beanie, it's actually the senior officer on the scene that finally voices what they are all starting to wonder. These bodies and this craft might be from another world.
Nurse Bean is shaken, but makes a quick decision about what to do next.
Instead of taking them to the morgue, she decides they need to get these bodies back to the hospital for more tests.
Bodies are wheeled in through the emergency entrance, right into the x-ray room. The doctor is immediately called. Meanwhile, Beanie starts taking x-rays of the victims.
Beanie and the doctor start examining the x-rays, trying to discover more about these beings. Suddenly, the military shows up. An Air Force detail comes in and starts confiscating everything. They pack up the bodies, the sheets, the x-rays, all of Beanie's and the doctor's notes.
They take all of the police reports and the crash scene photos. Every last scrap of evidence relating to this crash site and these three bodies is removed in a flash.
The last thing the Air Force representatives tell her is this day never happened. This is a matter of national security, and you are never to speak of this.
What kind of wreckage did Nurse Bean come into contact with? And what became of the small, strange beings she recovered? MUFON files reveal numerous cases involving the government seizing alien bodies from UFO crash sites. Hangar 1 opens its files to investigate the truth behind aliens in captivity, both dead and alive. The Mutual UFO Network, known as MUFON, is an independent organization not bound to any government. They investigate reports of UFO sightings from around the world. Over the past 5 decades, they have collected more than 70,000 files, stored at a secure location known as Hangar 1. Now, MUFON is granting access to their vast archive. These are the files of Hangar 1. Hangar 1 files reveal what Nurse Bean witnessed on the day of the crash, but remained silent about for years.
When you see these events, they shake everything you've ever been taught. And everything that is at the foundation of what you believe is suddenly challenged.
To unravel the mystery of where the bodies have been hidden, investigators turn to the files of one of the best-known UFO researchers, Leonard Stringfield.
Leonard Stringfield is one of the most important UFO researchers we've ever had. He was a long-time researcher going back to the 1950s who had interviewed many individuals over the years.
His work is considered groundbreaking for shedding light on both the number of UFO crashes that have occurred, as well as the government's involvement with them.
One incredible story from Stringfield's files comes from a first-hand witness who inventoried UFO crash debris at one of America's most prominent military bases. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Foreign Material Division, 1955.
Nice.
During the 1940s and 50s, a woman named Norma Gardner works in the Foreign Materials Division at Wright-Patterson. She's a very high
What do you want, Nate?
And in 1955, she is tasked with
Got anything to sell?
I do.
Over the course of a year,
See,
Norma
I should
Gardner
get this.
catalogs approximately 1,000 different items from UFO crashes. Now, she photographs and tags each one. One day, while on duty, she witnesses a cart being moved from one room to another. And on on that cart are dead alien bodies.
She notes that the aliens are suspended in some sort of chemicals to keep them preserved. They appear to be between 4 and 5 feet tall and have generally human features, but their heads are large compared to a human, and their eyes are narrow and slanted.
Although sworn to secrecy, Norma Gardner eventually breaks her silence.
In 1959, she retires from her job at Wright Pat for health reasons. She learns that she has cancer and that it's terminal.
It's on her deathbed that she confesses her story. She claims, Uncle Sam can't do anything to me once I'm in my grave. About 6 months later, she passed away.
Is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base the final resting place for aliens recovered from crash sites? Or is it merely a receiving station? Rumors suggest the answers reside in a special section of the base.
It was always believed that all the UFOs, the bodies, even aliens, they were all brought to Hangar 18 for analysis. In fact, the late Senator Barry Goldwater, who had a secret clearance, he tried to get into the UFO material that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Barry Goldwater was a United States Senator. He once ran for president back in 1964. And he was a very good personal friend of Air Force legend, General Curtis LeMay. One time he asked General LeMay about it. And as Goldwater said several times, it was the only time in their friendship that LeMay cussed him out and said, "Don't ever ask me about that again." Hangar 18's never really been confirmed. Most people now, I would say, think that it's probably a symbolic location.
What seems likely is that UFO evidence is being first brought into a receiving area where some witnesses may see the crates being unloaded. Then, the bodies are taken
I wonder where
and
I
stored
get
in
this
underground chambers below the base. There's a system of underground tunnels at Wright-Patterson that connect between vast vaults. These vaults are an excellent location to hide sensitive material.
Allspice and
Is
mistletoe.
Wright-Patterson Air Force Base really housing alien bodies? MUFON investigators are working to determine if the government really
What does it
is
look like?
concealing extraterrestrials. Case files reveal eyewitness testimony that
A
alien
root.
remains have been retrieved from
This
UFO
one.
crash sites. Further information suggests these entities may have been taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But what happens to these bodies once they arrive? The files of MUFON investigator Leonard Stringfield suggest they're taken to a secret underground facility. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1966. Deep inside, a secure, top-secret
Just
bunker.
slew water.
Stringfield speaks with a man, J.K.
If you're...
J.K. is a computer missile specialist with top security clearance. In 1966, he's working with the Nike missile program and stationed out of Wilmington, Ohio, a 45-minute drive from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
J.K. finds himself on many occasions at Wright-Pat. One of these times, he's escorted to an underground facility on the base that is inaccessible without top-level security. Inside this facility, he sees 9 glass cases. The glass appears to be about an inch thick, and each case is illuminated. And he can see that inside the cases are 9 bodies.
As documented in Stringfield's files, this story is not an isolated one.
Len has report after report of eyewitnesses who either worked at Wright-Patterson or who were visiting the base and witnessed some sort of similar evidence.
If this is true, it's incredible. I mean, it makes you wonder how many aliens the government has actually recovered. And have they ever come across live aliens?
This was really the crux of Stringfield's research. He really wanted to know what the government knew not only about recovered dead bodies, but live ones as well. And this is reflected throughout his files.
August 1980. Leonard Stringfield is contacted by a man claiming to have information about live aliens in military custody.
This man, Martin, calls Stringfield about the conversation that he had with his friend, an Air Force colonel. Evidently, Martin and this colonel would get together on several occasions and speculate about UFOs and aliens. This conversation was always very casual, but Martin suspected that this man knew more than what he was saying.
The last time the colonel would speak with Martin, the conversation turns to UFOs once more. But this time, the colonel becomes very serious. He informs Martin that he's dying of cancer and there's something he wants to get off his chest first. That's when the colonel tells Martin that there are 2 live aliens at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
According to Martin, the colonel claims that the Earth's atmosphere is too heavy for them, so they are kept alive by a formula of different gases. The formula is supplied by tanks and a mask. He goes on to claim that the government also has their craft intact. It had malfunctioned and landed somewhere in the Whitewater, Indiana area in 1969.
Len asks Martin if the colonel ever said why they were here. Martin says yes. While they're here for the purpose of observation, the colonel has heard that they've taken human specimens for all sorts of purposes.
There are some people who even speculate that the government has a deal with the visitors, that they can abduct some of our people in exchange for giving us technology. That's a scary thought.
The colonel also mentions that they seem to have limited communication with humans, but Martin isn't able to get any more details on the subject. The colonel dies 3 weeks after his conversation with Martin.
Stringfield's files are full of cases like Martin's, containing bits of information. But they all lead to the same conclusion. Living, breathing aliens have been held at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
That's good enough.
For decades.
See ya.
I'd prefer goodbye. Incredible. And he acknowledges that aliens are already in communication with some humans. You have to ask, who is communicating with these aliens and what have we learned?
Individuals have these profound experiences with telepathic contact with aliens, quite literally. You know, there's this idea that they're chosen.
A man who claims to be one of the chosen, saying he has intimate knowledge of extraterrestrials, is retired Army Sergeant Clifford Stone.
I know for a fact that it's much more what telling American people about alien visitors and the technologies that are involved.
Winds
That is
howling.
part of that program.
Stone also claims he was called upon during UFO crash recoveries to interface with the aliens.
Interfacing is where you actually have a communication with our visitors at a crash site. So we want to get as much information as we could from them. That's where interfacing came into play.
Bad idea.
Ooh.
All fear the untraceable.
Hangar 1 has opened its files to reveal the government's secret operation to cover UFO crashes. Eyewitness testimony
Ooh.
Leonard Stringer claims that extraterrestrials, both dead and alive, may be stored in a secure facility at Wright-Patterson Air
Another
Force
one.
Base. If this is true, what has the military
Selviar, I've been sitting with these damn whale carcasses for ages. And still no sign of Sinfin. Either he's wrecked against the rocks or he's left me high and dry. I told Anki not to bring the bastard into this. Now I don't know what to do. Who else would be willing to buy this sword? Maybe we ought to take it back to Kree. Maybe Kresh will laugh at and let it all slide.
Stone has a unique story. He actually worked for the military as an interfacer, which means it was his job to telepathically communicate with aliens. If anyone knows what the military learned about these aliens, he should.
But how does one become an interfacer?
People who do the interfacing, there's no school for that. They have to find the people that our visitors have already chosen to follow throughout their life, and to get them into the military and to recruit them in specialized programs to be there in case they need it for the interfacing.
Yeah.
According to Stone, his childhood encounter in 1957 was his first introduction to the military.
We had what was called Kelso's drugstore there on the corner of 11th, where we lived. I went down there and they had a magazine UFO special. Lo and behold, I'm behind me steps this Air Force captain, and he says, "Oh, you have an interest in UFOs."
This would not be the last conversation Stone would have with the Air Force captain about UFOs and alien contact.
I'm quite sure those talks that we had was a catalyst that ultimately led to a decision being made that even though I was medically rejected from military service, I'd be permitted to enter military service.
Something fascinating about Clifford is that he was never supposed to be in the military. The first time he applied for service, he was rejected for medical reasons. Then, a short time later, he was contacted and told to report for re-evaluation.
Well, this sounds very familiar to me because once again we have this idea that there is already contact going on. Why do they know about this guy? Why do they know that he has these abilities? Why did they recruit him when he wasn't even eligible for normal military service? Who turned them on to Clifford Stone?
Sergeant Stone claims that the process of interfacing became almost routine.
Once we secured the area and there was nothing to worry about, the medical unit would come up and render the medical aid to any of our visitors that might be injured. They were doctors, and they couldn't talk to them. If they had to ask a question, then they had to have me or whoever the interfacer was there to talk to them.
This information was compiled into a special handbook.
They had a book of 57 different species that we had thus far identified as visiting planet Earth. It was titled along the lines of guidelines on interaction with our visitors.
Has the military actually come into contact with and documented 57 different species of aliens?
They had pictures, so they at least had some contact with each and every one of those species that was there. But went into some of their cultural backgrounds and some of the
PPE, first aid treatments that we could render if they had certain injuries.
The idea that there's more than one kind of alien, that's just another one of those things that just makes a little bit more sense. When I look up in the sky, I see an awful lot of stars up there, and I see an awful lot of possibilities.
And the possibilities of what these visitors could teach us seem endless.
When we had the various visitors in custody, we referred to them as guests. But actually, they are, how can I put this? Technological prisoners. They have knowledge of technology beyond us, and we want that knowledge.
This is potentially very dangerous technology that has to be kept under control. You certainly do not want potential enemies to get their hands on this.
The technology is so terrific and horrific that it can destroy every living thing on this planet. We were concerned about that technology falling into the wrong hands, also at the same time acquiring that technology, making that military application ready, so it gave us a better weapon. And that hasn't gone away.
Sometimes the role of interfacer could take a serious toll on those involved, including Sergeant Stone.
The bad thing about being an interfacer is that when this interfacing is taking place, all the emotions that they're feeling, you're feeling. The emotions you're feeling.
Not in the mood for roughhousing today.
MUFON investigators are searching for answers about what the military knows about extraterrestrials. According to retired Army Sergeant Clifford Stone, the government has detailed information on at least 57 different alien species.
See if you're common folk, but devil take you.
1969, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Clifford Stone is called in to interface with an alien in custody.
I was picked up by a staff car and I went there. When I got there, I went on in back to the room where our visitor was at.
Stinky husband.
Foreigner,
When I got back there, you feel what they're feeling. And our visitor looked down at me, and I looked up at him.
Ow!
I'll never forget the words. I am afraid.
Oh.
I tried
What
to say,
the
you know, I'm not
fuck?
going to hurt you. I want to help you.
What a sword.
And I opened his head and said, you know, as long as I'm here, no harm's going to come to you. And he says, but harm's going to come to you and others in this room.
Can you toss an axe? Me brother can.
Stone learns from the alien that its companions have an extraction plan which could jeopardize the lives of many U.S. soldiers at the base. The alien is actually trying to warn Stone.
I went ahead and said, if you were outside,
Whoa, what a
would
sword.
that help? And he said, if I was outside, then there was nothing that would harm him.
Can you toss an axe? Me brother can.
Hoping to prevent a dangerous confrontation, Stone devises a plan to help free the alien.
I told the colonel that, you know, he's wanting to show me something, but all
Step aside.
has to be bad because anyone else is going to be in danger. So the colonel was hesitant first, but then he went ahead and told everyone to clear the building. As soon as everybody was out, keep an eye on behind the back door.
Stone and the alien make it out of the building, avoiding the guards all the way to the fence line.
I'm cutting the wire to just make enough space for him to get out. tearing my hands up doing it. I kept hearing people in the back hollering, order, promotion, order. And I was really waiting to die that night. I mean, I expected to get shot.
You can't imagine the situation. Stone knows he can't just tell his colonel, let the alien go, because there's no way the military's going to give up a valuable entity like this.
Stone says he manages to cut a hole in the fence large enough for the alien to slip through.
When he went out, there was this bright light. There's no way I can describe it. It just shined down, then went back up. He was gone. The ET was all over there.
With the alien safely gone, Stone turns to face the armed guards.
So they took me back in the building. And of course I had caught him. I mean, he was very angry and telling me, you can be court-martialed. You're in serious trouble.
What the fuck? How come I can't talk to anyone?
All these men by allowing this alien to escape. And his only hope is that somebody somehow realizes this.
Fucking Christ.
To Stone's relief, the colonel does not bring charges against him.
I think that the colonel was well aware of the fact that similar incidents
But
had
Jennifer and the
happened
Witchers
before.
managed to do it. The
As
ugliest
a
man
result,
alive revealed
there were
himself to
casualties
be
among
not man,
our
but
military
elf,
forces.
and an
I
elven
think he
sage
remembered
at that.
those, and I think he decided
Avalok, for this was his
he needed
name,
to go ahead
was
and
the
not be
elven
too harsh
mage
with
who had helped Ciri flee the hunt, then hidden her
What
away.
was the military
I
hoping to
missed.
learn from this alien before his escape?
It was during the time of the
What
Cold
is it?
War. We were trying to
Retrieve
acquire
the
that
property you
technology
lost.
and make it part of our
Thanks be to
technology as
Freya.
quickly
Where'd
and
you find it?
rapidly as we could.
Northern part of the Isle, near the whale cemetery. Don't ask me how it got there. Long story. At any rate, don't need to worry about the thieves. They won't steal ever again.
All we want to know is
Your reward.
how can we
Sure as hell
weaponize
earned it. And a lot of bit more from myself. If true you'd not been found, I'd have had to wash the shame away with my own
I would
blood.
suspect that there is that kind of concern among the because basically, Earth is a very dangerous place to visit. And Earthlings
3 points.
are a very dangerous species.
Seriously? Jesus.
The files of Hangar 1 have uncovered startling stories that detail the